The blood on her white wedding dress had barely dried when Tabitha Kane stumbled into the dusty main street of Caldwell, Idaho, her bare feet leaving crimson footprints in the September heat of 1882. She clutched a torn veil to her chest, her honey-colored hair falling in wild tangles around her shoulders, and her green eyes darted frantically at every shadow, as though death itself pursued her through the afternoon sun. The few townsfolk who witnessed her arrival would later swear they had never seen such raw terror etched into a human face, nor such desperate determination burning beneath it. Wade Harrison was checking the cinch on his saddle outside the general store when she collapsed not 10 feet from where he stood. He moved without thinking, catching her before she hit the ground completely, his weathered hands steadying her trembling frame. Up close, he could see the bruises forming along her jaw, the scratches on her arms, and the way her whole body shook like a leaf in a storm. "Please," she gasped, her fingers digging into his shirt with surprising strength. "Please, you have to help me. He is coming. He will find me." Wade glanced around the street, his instincts sharpening. At 32, he had spent enough years working cattle drives and helping his family run their ranch to recognize genuine fear when he saw it. This woman was not running from shame or scandal. She was running for her life. "Who is coming?" he asked, his voice low and steady as he helped her stand more securely. "Victor Marlowe," she whispered, and the name came out like a curse. "My husband, or he was supposed to be. I ran during the ceremony when I realized what he truly is." Wade had heard of Victor Marlowe. Everyone in southern Idaho had heard the name. He was a wealthy rancher from over near Silver City, a man who had made his fortune through means that most folks pretended not to question: cattle that disappeared from other ranges, accidents that befell anyone who opposed his expansion, witnesses who suddenly could not remember what they had seen. The law could never prove anything, but the rumors painted a picture of a man who took what he wanted and destroyed anything in his way. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Wade said, making a decision that would alter the course of his entire life. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though her legs looked ready to give out. Wade kept his arm around her waist, supporting most of her weight as he guided her toward the boarding house at the end of the street. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the establishment, took one look at Tabitha's condition and ushered them inside without a single question. "Third room on the left," the older woman said, her face grim. "I will bring water and bandages." Wade helped Tabitha up the stairs, acutely aware of how she leaned against him, how small she felt, despite the steel he sensed in her spine. In the simple room, with its clean bed and washstand, he finally got a proper look at her in the light filtering through the lace curtains. She was beautiful, he realized with an uncomfortable jolt. Not in the delicate, ornamental way of the society, women whose portraits sometimes appeared in newspapers, but in a way that suggested strength beneath the softness. Her face held intelligence and determination alongside the fear, and her eyes met his directly when she spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now that walls surrounded them. "You did not have to help me. Most people would not want to cross Victor Marlowe." "Most people are not me," Wade replied, and he meant it. The Harrison family had built their ranch through honest work, and they had never bowed to bullies. "Why don't you tell me what happened?" Tabitha sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands twisting the ruined veil. "My father owned a small ranch near Silver City. When he died last year, Victor started courting me. I thought he was kind, that he genuinely cared for me. I was alone and scared of losing everything my father had built. I said yes when he proposed." She took a shaky breath, and Wade found himself wanting to reach out to comfort her, though he kept his hands to himself. "The wedding was today," she continued. "Before the ceremony started, I overheard him talking to one of his men. They did not know I was there. Victor was laughing about how, once we were married, he would own my land outright, and he could finally complete his plans to control all the water rights in the valley. He said something else, too." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He said his first wife's death was easier than he expected, and mine would be just as convenient when the time came." Wade felt anger flare hot in his chest. He had known Marlowe had a reputation, but murder was beyond even the darkest rumors. "His first wife drowned," Tabitha said, her eyes haunted. "Everyone said it was an accident, but hearing him talk about it like that, I knew. I knew I was marrying a killer, and I would be next." "So you ran," Wade said. "So I ran," she confirmed, right there in the middle of the ceremony in front of everyone. "I grabbed my skirts and I ran." I took a horse from outside the church and rode as hard as I could. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. How did you end up in Caldwell? The horse threw me about 5 miles back, she admitted. I walked the rest of the way. I chose Caldwell because I thought maybe in a smaller town I could disappear for a while, figure out what to do next. She looked up at him, and the hope in her eyes made something in his chest tighten. But he will come looking for me. Victor does not let go of things he considers his. He will never stop hunting me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of truth. Wade thought of the comfortable life he had been living, running cattle with his 2 brothers on the family ranch, spending his evenings at the saloon or reading by the fire. He thought of how easy it would be to walk away, to leave this woman to her fate, to avoid the storm that was surely coming. Then he looked at her again, at the courage it must have taken to run, at the strength she was showing even now when she had every reason to crumble. Then, "I'll never stop protecting," he heard himself say. Tabitha's eyes widened. "You do not understand what you are saying. Victor has men, resources, money. He will come here. He will be dangerous." "I understand perfectly," Wade said, and he did. He understood that he was signing up for trouble, possibly for violence, certainly for complications that would ripple through his peaceful life like stones thrown into a pond. He understood, and he was doing it anyway. "You need help, and I'm offering it." Mrs. Patterson arrived then with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a dress that looked like it would fit Tabitha reasonably well. The older woman's eyes were sharp as she looked between them. "Victor Marlowe's men were through here 3 days ago," she said quietly. "Buying up land, making offers people could not refuse. I heard he was getting married today. I suspect that did not go according to his plans." "No, madam," Tabitha said. "It did not." Mrs. Patterson nodded once, decisively. "Then you will stay here as long as you need. I have never liked bullies, and I like murderers even less." She set down her supplies and fixed Wade with a meaningful look. "You are taking on something heavy, Wade Harrison?" "I know," he said simply. After Mrs. Patterson left, Wade excused himself to give Tabitha privacy to clean up and change. He went downstairs and found the boarding house owner in her kitchen, preparing supper. "She is telling the truth, Mrs." Patterson said before he could speak. "About Marlowe's first wife, I mean. I knew the girl. Sweet thing, barely 19 when she married him. 6 months later, she drowned in a creek that was not deep enough to cover a man's knees. The law called it an accident, said she must have hit her head. But I always wondered." Wade leaned against the door frame, his mind working through possibilities and plans. "He will come here, probably soon." "What will you do?" "Keep her safe," Wade said. "Whatever that takes." "You are a good man, Wade Harrison," Mrs. Patterson said. "Your mother would be proud." His mother had died when he was 17, but her lessons about standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves had stayed with him. "I hope so," he said quietly. He spent the next hour making arrangements. He sent word to his brothers at the ranch that he would be staying in town for a few days. He visited the marshal's office and had a long conversation with Bill Cooper, explaining the situation in careful terms. Marshal Cooper was a fair man, but he was also practical. "Without proof of a crime, I cannot arrest Marlowe," the marshal said, his weathered face troubled. "But I can make sure he knows the law is watching if he comes to Caldwell. That might make him think twice about causing trouble here." It was not much, but it was something. Wade thanked him and headed back to the boarding house as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He found Tabitha in the small sitting room, wearing the borrowed dress and looking more composed, though the shadows under her eyes spoke of exhaustion. She stood when he entered, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "I have been thinking," she said. "This is too much to ask of a stranger. You have your own life, your own concerns. I should move on, maybe head to Boise or even further." "Running will not solve this," Wade said, moving to stand near the window where he could watch the street. "Marlowe will chase you across the whole country if he is as determined as you say. Better to make a stand somewhere, with help." "But why here? Why you?" Wade considered the question. He could give her practical reasons about knowing the land and having family nearby, about Caldwell being small enough to notice strangers, but large enough to have resources. All of that was true, but there was something else, too, something he was only beginning to recognize. Because when you ran into that street today, looking like the world was ending but still on your feet, still fighting, I saw someone worth helping, he said honestly. Because I have spent my whole life watching bullies take what they want, and I'm tired of it. Because maybe this is something I am supposed to do. Tabitha studied his face for a long moment, and he let her look, keeping his gaze steady. Whatever she saw, there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. Then I accept your help, she said, and I will find a way to repay you. Let's worry about keeping you alive first, Wade said with a small smile. We can talk about payment later. They ate supper with Mrs. Patterson in the boarding house dining room, a simple meal of stew and fresh bread. Wade found himself watching Tabitha as she ate, noting the way she held herself carefully, like someone trying not to take up too much space. He wondered what her life had been like before today, what dreams she had held before they were shattered by the revelation of her intended husband's true nature. Tell me about your father's ranch, he said, wanting to fill the silence with something other than worry. Tabitha's face softened slightly. It was beautiful, small, maybe only 300 acres, but it had good water and good grass. My father raised cattle there, built everything from nothing after he came west from Ohio. My mother died when I was 12, so it was just the two of us for years. He taught me everything about running a ranch, how to read the weather, how to doctor sick cattle, how to keep books and manage supplies. That's more than most women know, Wade observed. My father said knowledge was protection, Tabitha replied. He said if I understood how the ranch worked, no one could take advantage of me. Her expression turned bitter. I suppose he was wrong about that. Marlowe took advantage of your grief and your loneliness, Wade said firmly. That does not make you foolish. That makes him a predator. She looked at him with surprise, then something like gratitude. Thank you for saying that. I have been calling myself every kind of fool since this morning. You are brave, Wade said. You figured out the truth and you ran. A lot of people would have been too scared to do even that much. They talked through the evening, and Wade found himself enjoying her company more than he expected. She was intelligent and well-spoken, with a dry sense of humor that surfaced occasionally through her fear. She asked about his family, and he told her about his brothers, Matthew and Samuel, and about the ranch his father had started 30 years ago, when Idaho was still rough frontier. It sounds like a good life, Tabitha said wistfully. It is, Wade agreed. Hard work, but honest. The kind of life where you can sleep with a clear conscience. I would like that, she said quietly. A clear conscience and a safe place to sleep. The words stayed with Wade as he made his way to his own room later that night. Mrs. Patterson had insisted he take a room on the same floor as Tabitha, for propriety's sake, as much as for protection. He lay in the narrow bed and thought about the woman down the hall, about the fear in her eyes and the strength in her spine, and he knew without question that he had made the right choice. Morning came too soon, bringing with it the crisp air of early autumn. Wade was up with the dawn, checking the street from his window and seeing nothing out of the ordinary. Caldwell was waking slowly, shopkeepers opening their doors and early risers heading about their business. He found Tabitha already awake, sitting in the boarding house parlor with a cup of coffee and a troubled expression. Could not sleep? He asked, pouring himself coffee from the pot Mrs. Patterson had left on the sideboard. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victor's face, she admitted. That look he gets when someone defies him. Like cold fury mixed with absolute certainty that he will win in the end. Wade sat down across from her, his own cup warming his hands in the cool morning air. Tell me more about him, his habits, his men, how he operates. The more I know, the better I can prepare. Tabitha took a deep breath and began to talk. She painted a picture of a man who was charming in public, presenting himself as a gentleman rancher and pillar of the community, but who showed a different face behind closed doors. She spoke of his temper, which could turn from pleasant to vicious in an instant, and of the men who worked for him, hard cases and gunfighters who were loyal because he paid well and asked no questions about their pasts. His foreman is the worst, she said, her voice dropping. Carl Jensen. He has dead eyes. I heard Victor tell him once to make a problem disappear, and the next day, a man who had been threatening to go to the territorial governor about Victor's land deals was found dead on the road. They said it was a robbery, but his money was still in his pockets. Wade absorbed this information, his jaw tight. How many men does he usually keep around? At least 6 or 7 who live on the ranch, Tabitha said, but he can call on more if he needs them. He has connections in Silver City and in Boise, too. Businessmen who owe him favors, politicians he has bought or blackmailed. He is not just one man, Wade. He is like a spider in the center of a web. Spiders can be killed, Wade said simply. His brothers arrived mid-morning, responding to the message he had sent. Matthew was the oldest at 35, broad-shouldered and serious, with a thick beard and steady gray eyes. Samuel was the youngest at 28, quicker to smile, but no less capable, with the same dark hair and strong build that ran in the Harrison family. Wade met them outside and explained the situation, watching their faces as they processed what he was telling them. When he finished, Matthew was quiet for a long moment. "This is trouble," he finally said. "I know," Wade replied. "Marlowe is dangerous," Matthew continued. "He has money and influence. Going against him could hurt the ranch, could hurt all of us." "I know that too," Wade said. Samuel looked between his brothers, then shook his head with a slight grin. "But you are going to help her anyway, are not you?" "Yes," Wade said simply. Matthew sighed, but there was no real disapproval in the sound. "All right then, what do you need from us?" Relief flooded through Wade. He had been prepared to do this alone if necessary, but having his brothers at his back made everything easier. "Information, mostly. If Marlowe and his men come to Caldwell, I need to know about it before they reach the boarding house. And if things go bad, I might need backup." "You will have it," Matthew said firmly. "The Harrisons do not run from trouble, and we do not abandon people who need help. Mother taught us better than that." They spent the next hour planning. Matthew would put the word out among the local ranchers and townspeople to watch for strangers, particularly anyone matching the description of Marlowe or his known associates. Samuel would make sure the ranch was secure and keep supplies ready in case Wade and Tabitha needed to move quickly. Wade would stay close to the boarding house and keep Tabitha safe. When his brothers left, Wade felt more confident, but no less aware of the danger. He went back inside and found Tabitha in the dining room, mending a tear in the borrowed dress with neat, practiced stitches. "Your brothers seem like good men," she said without looking up. "They are," Wade confirmed. "They will help us." "Even though it puts them at risk too," Tabitha said, finally meeting his eyes. "Even though they do not know me at all." "That is what family does," Wade said. "And right now, you are under the protection of the Harrison family, which makes you ours to defend." Something shifted in Tabitha's expression, a softening that made her look younger and more vulnerable. "I have not had a family in so long," she said quietly. "Not since my father died. I forgot what it felt like to have people on your side." Wade found himself moving closer without quite meaning to, drawn by the raw emotion in her voice. "You have people on your side now," he said. "I promise you that." She looked up at him, and for a moment the air between them felt charged with something Wade could not quite name. It was not just protectiveness or sympathy. It was something more, something that made his heart beat faster and his skin feel warm. Then Tabitha looked away, breaking the moment, and Wade stepped back, uncertain what had just passed between them. The day wore on peacefully enough. Wade stayed close, watching the street and talking with Marshal Cooper again in the afternoon. The marshal had sent telegrams to Silver City, making inquiries about Marlowe under the pretense of routine information sharing. The responses painted a picture that matched what Tabitha had told him. Marlowe was powerful, connected, and not a man to cross lightly. "But here is something interesting," Marshal Cooper said, showing Wade one of the telegrams. "The deputy over in Silver City mentioned that Marlowe has been making noise about a stolen horse. Claims his bride took one of his prize mares when she ran off. So he has already started building a case against her," Wade said grimly. "Looks that way," the marshal agreed. "He could use it as an excuse to come here with the law on his side, at least technically. I cannot stop him from pressing charges for horse theft if he has a mind to." "Even though she ran for her life? Try proving that in court," Marshal Cooper said. "It would be her word against his, and he has the money for fancy lawyers." Wade thanked the marshal and returned to the boarding house, his mind churning. He found Tabitha in the small garden behind the building, sitting on a bench in the shade of an apple tree. She looked peaceful for the first time since he had met her, her face turned up to catch the breeze. He hated to disturb that peace, but she needed to know. He sat down beside her and relayed what the marshal had told him. Tabitha listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening as he spoke. "Of course he is," she said when Wade finished. "Victor always has a plan. He will make me look like a thief and a madwoman. He will say I broke his heart and stole his property, And who will believe my story? A woman who ran from her own wedding? I believe you, Wade said firmly. You are one man, Tabitha said, but there was gratitude in her voice. But thank you. That means more than you know. They sat in silence for a while, and Wade found himself acutely aware of how close she was, of the scent of soap and something floral that clung to her. He had known her for less than a day, but already she felt important in a way he could not quite explain. Can I ask you something? Tabitha said finally. Anything, Wade replied. Why are not you married? A man like you, with land and family, must have had offers. Wade smiled slightly. A few, he admitted. But I never found the right woman. My brothers used to tease me, said I was too particular. But I always figured it was better to be alone than to settle for someone I did not truly care about. That is wise, Tabitha said. I wish I had been that wise. I was so scared of losing my father's ranch, so worried about being alone, that I ignored every warning sign. Victor was always a little too controlling, a little too interested in the property boundaries and water rights. But I told myself that was just practical, that he was being a good businessman. You could not have known what he really was, Wade said. I should have known, Tabitha insisted. I should have trusted my instincts. There were moments when I felt uncomfortable, when something he said or did made me uneasy. But I pushed those feelings down because I did not want to be alone. Wade understood that fear more than he wanted to admit. The frontier could be a lonely place, and the need for connection, for partnership, was powerful. Being alone is hard, he said, but being with the wrong person is worse. I know that now, Tabitha said with a bitter laugh. I learned that lesson rather dramatically. At least you learned it in time, Wade pointed out. If you had not overheard that conversation, if you had married him not knowing the truth, you might not have had a chance to run. Tabitha shuddered. I try not to think about that, about what would have happened if I had not been in the right place at the right time to hear him confess. She turned to look at Wade directly, her green eyes serious. Do you believe in fate, in things happening for a reason? Wade considered the question. I do not know about fate, he said slowly, but I know that sometimes we are given choices, moments where we can go one way or another. You made a choice yesterday. You chose to save yourself. That took courage. Or panic, Tabitha said. Courage and panic are not so different, Wade replied. Both make you act when action is needed. The difference is what you do after. You are still fighting. That is courage. She smiled at him, really smiled, and Wade felt something warm unfurl in his chest. He was in trouble, he realized, not just from Marlowe and the danger coming their way, but from something much more personal. He was starting to care about Tabitha Kane in a way that went beyond simple protectiveness. The realization should have worried him more than it did. Evening came with the smell of rain in the air. Mrs. Patterson served supper early, and Wade ate with Tabitha in the dining room while the sky outside darkened with gathering clouds. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and by the time they finished eating, the storm had arrived in earnest. Rain lashed against the windows, and lightning split the sky with brilliant white light. Wade had always liked storms, the way they made the world feel washed clean, but tonight he found himself tense, listening to every sound beneath the thunder. You are worried they will come tonight, Tabitha said. It was not a question. Storm like this provides good cover, Wade admitted. Hard to see who is coming until they are right on top of you. Tabitha set down her coffee cup with careful precision. I am sorry, she said quietly. I am sorry for bringing this trouble to your life. You did not bring the trouble, Wade corrected. Marlowe did. You were just trying to survive it. Another crash of thunder shook the building, and Tabitha flinched despite herself. Wade reached across the table without thinking, covering her hand with his. Her skin was warm, and he felt her fingers curl around his, holding tight. I am afraid, she admitted. Not just of Victor finding me. I am afraid of what he will do to you, to your family, to anyone who helps me. I am afraid that I have made things worse by running instead of better. Looking at your options honestly, Wade said, keeping his hand over hers. What else could you have done? Married a man you knew was a murderer? Hoped he would spare you when he had already killed once to get what he wanted? I could have gone to the law, Tabitha said. And told them what? That you overheard a conversation? Without proof, without witnesses, they could not have done anything. You know that. She nodded reluctantly. I know. But knowing I did the right thing does not make me less scared. Being scared is smart, Wade said. Fear keeps you careful, but you cannot let it paralyze you. They sat there as the storm raged outside, hands clasped across the table, and Wade realized this was the moment when he could still walk away, could still hand this problem over to someone else, could still return to his comfortable, uncomplicated life. And he knew with absolute certainty that he was not going to do any of those things. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world clean and bright. Wade was checking the street from his window when he saw the riders. 4 of them, coming down the main road at an easy pace that spoke of confidence and purpose. They were still too far away to make out details, but something about the way they moved set off alarms in Wade's mind. He moved quickly, knocking on Tabitha's door. She answered immediately, already dressed, her hair pinned up simply. Her eyes went wide when she saw his face. "What is wrong?" she asked. "Riders coming," Wade said. "Might be nothing, but I want you to stay inside and away from the windows." Tabitha's face paled, but she nodded without argument. "Be careful," she said, and the concern in her voice made Wade's chest tighten. "Always am," he said, managing a small smile before heading downstairs. Marshal Cooper was already on the street, having apparently spotted the riders too. He stood in front of his office, thumbs hooked in his belt, projecting an air of casual alertness. Wade joined him, positioning himself where he could see both the approaching riders and the boarding house. As the riders drew closer, Wade got a better look at them. 3 were clearly hired guns, hard-faced men wearing their weapons like they knew how to use them. The 4th was different, older, maybe 50, with silver threading through his dark hair and clothes that spoke of money. He sat his horse like a man who owned the world, Victor Marlowe. The riders stopped in front of the marshal's office, and Marlowe dismounted with practiced ease. Up close, Wade could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he assessed everything and everyone with the cool detachment of a man moving chess pieces. "Marshal Cooper," Marlowe said, his voice smooth and cultured. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Mr. Marlowe," the marshal replied neutrally. "What brings you to Caldwell?" "I am looking for someone," Marlowe said. "A young woman, blonde, green eyes, probably wearing a white dress. Her name is Tabitha Kane, and she is my fiancée. We were to be married yesterday, but she had some sort of nervous episode and fled. Her friends and I are very worried about her." The lie was delivered perfectly, with just the right notes of concern and confusion. Wade felt his hands curl into fists. "She also stole a valuable horse when she left," one of the other men added. This must be Jensen, Wade thought, recognizing the dead eyes Tabitha had described. "We have every right to press charges. If the lady is in Caldwell, I have not seen her," Marshal Cooper said carefully. "But if I do see her, I will certainly let you know. As for the horse theft, you will need to file a formal complaint." Marlowe's eyes swept the street, missing nothing. They paused on Wade, assessing and dismissing him in the same glance. "I appreciate your cooperation, Marshal. I am sure you understand that this is a delicate situation. Miss Kane is clearly not in her right mind. She may say things that are not true, make accusations that have no basis in reality. It is a symptom of her condition." "Her condition," the marshal repeated flatly. "Female hysteria," Marlowe said, with just the right note of embarrassed concern. "Her father's death affected her deeply. I am afraid the stress of the wedding may have been too much. She needs rest and medical care, not to be wandering the countryside alone." It was a brilliant strategy, Wade realized with cold fury. Marlowe was setting up a narrative that would make anything Tabitha said seem like the ravings of an unstable woman. If she accused him of murder or threats, he could point to her hysterical flight from the wedding as proof of her mental state. "Well, like I said, if I see her, I will let you know," Marshal Cooper repeated. Marlowe smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I do hope nothing has happened to her. A woman alone on the frontier faces so many dangers. I would hate to think of her coming to harm because of her confused state." The threat was clear beneath the polite words. Wade stepped forward before he could stop himself. "Any woman in Caldwell will be treated with respect and protected if she needs it," he said evenly. "We do not take kindly to threats here, veiled or otherwise." Marlowe's attention fixed on Wade fully for the first time. "And you are?" "Wade Harrison," he replied, meeting the man's gaze without flinching. "I run cattle with my family in these parts." "I see," Marlowe said, and his smile turned sharp. Well, Mr. Harrison, I assure you I am not threatening anyone. I am simply concerned about my fiancée. I am sure you can understand that. I understand a lot of things, Wade said. The moment stretched taut between them, and Wade saw the flash of anger in Marlowe's eyes before the man controlled it. Quite, Marlowe said coldly. He turned back to Marshal Cooper. If you do see Miss Kane, please send word immediately. I am staying at the hotel in Silver City. Any assistance will be generously rewarded. He remounted his horse with fluid grace, and his men followed suit. As they turned to leave, Jensen's dead eyes swept over Wade with clear assessment. The message was obvious. They had marked him as trouble. Wade watched them ride out of town, his jaw tight. When they were out of sight, Marshal Cooper let out a long breath. That was not smart, Wade, he said. You put yourself on Marlowe's radar. He was going to notice me eventually, Wade replied. Better to make it clear from the start that I will not be intimidated. Brave or foolish, the marshal muttered. Sometimes it is hard to tell the difference. Wade returned to the boarding house to find Tabitha standing just inside the front window, hidden by the curtains but clearly watching. Her face was white, her hands trembling. That was him, she said unnecessarily. He is here. He is gone now, Wade said, though they both knew it was only temporary. And he does not know for sure that you are here. He is fishing. Did you hear what he said? Tabitha asked, her voice rising slightly. About me being hysterical, mentally unstable? He's going to make everyone think I am insane. No one will believe anything I say. Wade crossed to her, taking her gently by the shoulders. I believe you, he said firmly. Marshal Cooper believes you. My brothers believe you. That is not nothing. But is it enough? Tabitha asked desperately. He has money and influence and the law on his side, at least on paper. What do we have? The truth, Wade said, and sometimes that is the strongest weapon of all. He wished he felt as confident as he sounded. The truth was he was worried. Marlowe was more formidable than he had expected, more controlled and calculating. The man was not just a brutal killer. He was smart, which made him infinitely more dangerous. The next few days passed in tense waiting. Marlowe did not return to Caldwell, but his presence hung over the town like a storm cloud. Wade stayed close to Tabitha, and they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings they spent in the boarding house, talking over coffee about everything and nothing. Tabitha told him about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before she could properly walk, about the books she had read by lamplight, and the dreams she had harbored of seeing more of the world. Wade found himself sharing things he rarely talked about, his mother's death and how it had changed the family, his fears about whether he was doing enough to help run the ranch, whether he measured up to his father's legacy, the loneliness of being 32 and still unmarried in a world where most men had families by his age. You have not met the right woman yet, Tabitha said one morning as they walked through town, Wade keeping careful watch on their surroundings. That does not mean you won't. Maybe, Wade said. Then, because he was feeling bold, he added, or maybe I just met her at the worst possible time. Tabitha stopped walking, turning to look at him with wide eyes. The sun caught her hair, turning it to gold, and Wade's heart hammered in his chest at his own audacity. Wade, she said softly, and there was a world of meaning in his name. I know the timing is terrible, he said quickly. I know you are running for your life, and the last thing you need is me making things complicated. But I also know that I look forward to seeing you every morning, that I think about you when I should be thinking about other things, and that the idea of you being hurt makes me want to tear the world apart with my bare hands. So there it is. Make of it what you will. Tabitha was quiet for a long moment, and Wade braced himself for rejection, for the gentle explanation that she could not think about such things right now. Instead, she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I think about you too, she admitted. When I am scared, I think about your voice saying everything will be all right. When I worry about the future, I imagine what it might be like to have you in it. And I know that is foolish because we barely know each other, and because my life is a disaster right now, but I cannot seem to help it. Wade squeezed her hand, feeling like the sun had come out from behind clouds. So, we are both fools, he said. Together, Tabitha agreed, and the word felt like a promise. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, and if anyone in town noticed and gossiped, Wade found he did not care. Let them talk. Let the whole territory know that he had chosen to stand with Tabitha Kane. But their bubble of happiness could not last. 3 days after Marlowe's visit, Samuel came riding into town at a gallop, his face grim. Wade met him in the street, his heart already sinking. "Trouble at the ranch?" Samuel said without preamble. "Someone cut our fences last night. We lost about 20 head of cattle before we noticed, and could round them back up." Wade swore quietly. "Marlowe?" "Has to be," Samuel replied. "Matthew found boot prints that matched Jensen's size, and there were signs of at least 3 riders. They were not even trying to hide that they did it. This is a message." "Threatening my family to get to Tabitha," Wade said, anger burning hot in his chest. "Matthew thinks we should move her," Samuel said. "Take her to the ranch where we can better protect her, or maybe send her further away. Idaho City maybe, or even all the way to Portland." Wade thought about it, weighing the options. Before he could respond, Tabitha appeared at his elbow. She had clearly heard enough to understand what was happening. "I will go," she said quietly. "I will not let your family suffer because of me." "That is not what I want," Wade said immediately. "But it is what needs to happen," Tabitha insisted. "They are attacking you to get to me. If I leave, they have no reason to keep hurting the people you love." "They will just follow you," Wade pointed out, "and you will be alone." "I have been alone before," Tabitha said, but her voice wavered slightly. Wade made a decision. "We go to the ranch," he said. "All of us. If Marlowe wants a fight, he can come to us on our ground. But I am not sending you off alone, and I am not giving up." Samuel looked between them, reading what was unspoken in the air. "All right," he said, "but we better move fast. Matthew sent me to fetch you both, and he wants us back before dark." They gathered what few belongings Tabitha had and said goodbye to Mrs. Patterson, who pressed a bundle of food into Tabitha's hands and whispered that she would pray for them both. Then they were mounted, Wade on his reliable bay gelding and Tabitha on a gentle mare Samuel had brought, riding out of Caldwell as the afternoon sun beat down. The Harrison Ranch was a good 2-hour ride northeast of town, nestled in a valley with a creek running through it and mountains rising in the distance. As they approached, Wade felt some of his tension ease. This was home, the land he had grown up on and loved. Here, he was not just one man against the world. Here, he had resources and backup. Matthew met them in the yard, his face serious but calm. "Good, you made it before dark," he said. "Come on, let us get inside and figure out our next move." The Harrison house was solidly built, a 2-story structure their father had constructed with his own hands using timber from the surrounding forest. Inside, it was comfortable and lived in, with worn furniture and the lingering smell of coffee and wood smoke. Wade showed Tabitha to the spare room, acutely aware of how she looked around with wide eyes, taking in what his home revealed about his life. When she smiled softly at the sight of books stacked on every available surface, he felt absurdly pleased. "Your family likes to read," she observed. "Mother insisted on it," Wade explained. "Said that working the land was important, but so was feeding the mind. She had crates of books shipped from back east every year." "She sounds like she was wonderful," Tabitha said. "She was," Wade agreed, feeling the familiar ache of loss. "I think she would have liked you." They gathered in the kitchen, all 4 of them, and Matthew laid out the situation with military precision. "The fence cutting was just the first move," he said. "They are probing, seeing how we react. Next, they will escalate. Maybe more property damage, maybe worse." "We could go to the territorial authorities," Samuel suggested. "Make a formal complaint." "Based on boot prints and suspicions?" Matthew shook his head. "They will tell us to take it up with the local law, and the local law cannot do anything without proof." "So what do we do?" Samuel asked. "Just wait for them to attack us?" "We make it clear that we are not easy targets," Wade said. "We post watches, we stay armed, and we make sure everyone knows that anyone who comes onto our land uninvited will be met with force." "And then what?" Matthew asked quietly. "We live like this forever, always watching our backs?" It was the question none of them wanted to face. Wade looked at Tabitha, saw the guilt and grief in her eyes, and knew they needed a real solution. "We need proof," he said slowly. "Proof that Marlowe killed his first wife, proof that he is a danger to Tabitha. Something solid enough that the territorial government, or even the federal marshals, would have to act." "How do we get that?" Samuel asked. "I might know," Tabitha said hesitantly. All 3 men turned to look at her. When I was at Victor's ranch preparing for the wedding, I saw him keep papers in a safe in his study, land deeds, contracts, that sort of thing. But there were also letters, correspondence he kept. I do not know what was in them, but he was very particular about that safe. He did not think I noticed, but I saw the combination once when he was opening it. Wade leaned forward. You remember it? I think so, Tabitha said. I have always been good with numbers. It is 18733, the day his first wife died. The room was silent as they absorbed this information. Matthew was the first to speak. That is cold, he said flatly. That is Victor, Tabitha replied. Everything is calculated. Using that date as his combination is his way of proving to himself that he is clever enough to hide the truth in plain sight. So we need to break into his ranch, crack his safe, and steal his papers, Samuel summarized. That is a terrible plan. It is the only plan we have, Wade countered. If those papers contain anything incriminating, anything we can take to the authorities, it could end this. Tabitha would be safe, and Marlowe would be behind bars where he belongs. And if we get caught, Matthew asked, then we will be the ones behind bars, Wade admitted. But I do not see another option. Do any of you? The brothers looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that came from a lifetime of knowing each other's thoughts. Finally, Matthew nodded. All right, he said. But we do this smart. We plan it out. We watch the place first, and we do not take unnecessary risks. Agreed? Agreed, Wade said, relief flooding through him. They spent the evening planning. Samuel would ride to Silver City and watch Marlowe's ranch, learning the patterns of the guards and staff. Matthew would stay at the Harrison Ranch with Tabitha, keeping her safe while Wade and Samuel did the scouting. Once they had enough information, they would make their move. Later, when his brothers had gone to bed, Wade found Tabitha standing on the front porch, looking out at the stars. He joined her, maintaining a respectful distance even though he wanted to be closer. You do not have to do this, Tabitha said without looking at him. Breaking into Victor's ranch is dangerous. If he catches you, he could kill you and claim it was defending his property. I know the risks, Wade said. But you are going anyway, she said, finally turning to face him. Why? Why are you willing to risk so much for me? Wade considered how to answer, how to put into words the tangle of feelings inside him. A week ago, if someone had asked me what I wanted from life, I would have said the ranch, my family, maybe someday a wife and children, simple things. But now, all I want is to make sure you are safe. I want to see you smile without fear behind it. I want to know that you can live the life you deserve without looking over your shoulder. He paused, then added softly, and I want a chance to see where this goes between us, without Marlowe's shadow over everything. Tabitha's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. What if something happens to you? I could not bear it, Wade, not after you have done so much for me already. Nothing is going to happen, Wade said with more confidence than he felt. I am going to get the proof we need, and then this will be over. She moved closer, and he opened his arms, gathering her against his chest. She fit there perfectly, her head tucked under his chin, her arms wrapped around his waist. They stood there for a long time, holding each other beneath the vast Idaho sky, and Wade silently promised himself that he would do whatever it took to keep her safe. Samuel left the next morning, heading for Silver City with supplies for a week of observation. Matthew threw himself into ranch work, and Wade helped, while keeping one eye on the house where Tabitha was staying. She had insisted on making herself useful, and he kept finding evidence of her work: fresh bread in the kitchen, mended clothes, the vegetable garden weeded and tidy. She is a keeper, Matthew said one afternoon as they repaired the cut fence. You could do worse than settling down with someone like her. I know, Wade said, driving a fence post into the ground with more force than necessary. You are falling in love with her, Matthew observed. It was not a question. Wade straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. Is it that obvious? Only to anyone with eyes, Matthew said dryly. But Wade, you need to think about what that means. Even if we get the proof and Marlowe goes to prison, Tabitha's life is complicated. She has a ranch she lost, a past full of trauma, and a lot of healing ahead of her. Are you ready for that? Yes, Wade said, without hesitation. I know it will not be easy, but when I think about my future now, she is in it. I cannot explain it better than that. Matthew smiled, the expression softening his weathered face. Then I hope this works out. You deserve happiness, little brother. Samuel returned 5 days later with detailed information. Marlowe's ranch was large and well guarded, but there were patterns. The guards changed shifts at midnight. The house staff retired around 10 in the evening. Marlowe himself often worked late in his study, but he retired to his bedroom on the second floor around 11. The safe is in the study, Samuel reported. Ground floor, back of the house. There is a window we can probably access without being seen, but we will need to be quick and quiet. They chose a night when the moon would be only a sliver, providing maximum darkness. Wade spent the day before in a strange state of calm, going through his preparations with methodical precision. He cleaned his rifle, checked his pistol, packed supplies. As evening approached, he felt the weight of what they were about to do settle over him. Tabitha found him in the barn, checking his saddle one more time. She watched him work for a moment before speaking. "Be careful," she said quietly. Wade looked up, seeing the fear in her eyes. He set down the saddle and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "I will come back," he promised. "And when I do, this will be over." "You cannot promise that," Tabitha said, her voice breaking slightly. "You cannot know what will happen." "Then I promise to do everything in my power to come back to you," Wade amended. "Is that better?" Tabitha searched his face, then rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and full of all the things they had not said yet. Wade's arms came around her, pulling her close, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Tabitha rested her forehead against his. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Please." "I will," Wade said, and sealed the promise with another kiss. He and Samuel left as full darkness fell, riding fast towards Silver City. They had debated bringing Matthew, but decided that someone needed to stay and protect Tabitha in case Marlowe made a move while they were gone. It was a 3-hour ride, and they spent it in silence, each man alone with his thoughts. They reached the outskirts of Marlowe's ranch just after 11, leaving their horses tied in a copse of trees a quarter-mile from the house. The ranch spread before them, dark except for a few scattered lights. They could see guards moving on patrol, but Samuel's scouting had been good. They knew the patterns. Moving slowly and carefully, they worked their way toward the back of the house. The study window was where Samuel had said it would be, and a quick check showed it was unlocked. They waited for the nearest guard to pass, counting seconds. Then Wade eased the window open and climbed inside. The study was dark and smelled of leather and tobacco. Wade's eyes adjusted slowly, picking out shapes. The desk, shelves of books, and there in the corner, the safe. Samuel climbed in behind him, and together they crossed to it. Wade's hands were steady as he worked the combination Tabitha had given him. 18733. The safe opened with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the quiet room. Inside were stacks of papers, deed, and ledgers. Wade pulled out his dark lantern, shielding it carefully as he and Samuel sorted through the documents. At first, it was just business records, but then Samuel found a bundle of letters tied with string. Wade untied them carefully, his heart pounding. The first few were unremarkable: business correspondence, social invitations. But the fourth letter made his blood run cold. It was addressed to Marlowe from a man named Douglas Pike, and it was dated just before Marlowe's first wife had died. The contents were carefully worded, but the meaning was clear. Pike was offering to handle a delicate problem for the right price. Marlowe's reply was tucked in behind it, agreeing to the terms. "This is it," Wade whispered. "This is proof that he hired someone to kill his first wife." "Take it all," Samuel urged. "We need to get out of here." Wade was reaching for the rest of the papers when the door to the study opened and light flooded the room. They both froze. Victor Marlowe stood in the doorway, a pistol in his hand and a cold smile on his face. "Mr. Harrison," he said pleasantly, "I have been expecting you." Wade's mind raced, calculating odds and options. They were trapped, caught red-handed, and Marlowe had every legal right to shoot them as intruders. "Nothing to say?" Marlowe asked, stepping into the room. Behind him, Wade could see Jensen and 2 other men. "I must say I am disappointed. I thought you would be smarter than this, but then men in love often do stupid things." "We know what you did," Wade said, his hand slowly moving toward his gun. "We have proof." "That?" Marlowe glanced at the letters in Wade's hand and laughed. "Those are just business documents. Nothing there that proves anything. And even if there were, they would be inadmissible as evidence since you stole them. Really, Mr. Harrison, you have accomplished nothing except giving me cause to kill you. Wade drew and fired in one smooth motion, aiming for the lamp on the desk. It exploded in a shower of glass and burning oil, plunging the room into chaos. Samuel was already moving, diving for the window, and Wade followed, clutching the letters to his chest. Shots rang out behind them, bullets whining past their heads. Wade felt fire along his ribs, knew he had been grazed, but kept running. They reached the horses, mounted in a tangle of reins and desperation, and rode like hell itself was chasing them. Because it was. Wade could hear shouts behind them, the thunder of pursuing horses. He and Samuel leaned low over their mounts' necks, pushing for every bit of speed. The night became a blur of darkness and pain and fear. They rode for an hour before the sounds of pursuit faded. When they finally slowed, checking behind them constantly, Wade realized his shirt was soaked with blood. The graze was worse than he had thought. "You are hit," Samuel said, his face pale in the darkness. "I will live," Wade said through gritted teeth. "We need to get these letters to the authorities. That is all that matters." They pushed on through the night, reaching the Harrison ranch as dawn was breaking. Matthew met them in the yard, taking one look at Wade and shouting for Tabitha. She came running from the house, her face going white when she saw the blood. "It is not as bad as it looks," Wade said, though the world was starting to spin slightly. They got him inside, and Tabitha took charge with a calm efficiency that spoke of experience. She cleaned the wound, a long graze across his ribs, and bandaged it tightly. Her hands were steady, but he could see tears tracking down her face. "You could have died," she said quietly, not looking at him. "But I did not," Wade replied, catching her hand. "And we got the proof. Those letters will put Marlowe away." Matthew had already sent Samuel to fetch Marshal Cooper. When the marshal arrived, Wade showed him the letters despite his brother's protests that he should rest. Cooper read through them carefully, his face growing grimmer with each page. "This is good," he said finally. "This is enough to bring to the territorial prosecutor, maybe even the federal marshal. But Wade, you need to understand something. You obtained these illegally. A good lawyer might get them thrown out." "But you will try?" Wade asked. "I will try," Cooper promised. "These letters suggest a conspiracy to commit murder. That is not something we take lightly in Idaho territory. I will send telegrams today, get the right people involved." Over the next week, things moved faster than Wade had dared hope. The territorial prosecutor took the evidence seriously, especially when combined with Tabitha's testimony about Marlowe's confession. A federal marshal came to interview them, a hard-eyed man named Garrett who listened to everything with careful attention. "Miss Kane," Marshal Garrett said when they had finished, "would you be willing to testify in court about what you overheard?" Tabitha straightened her shoulders. "Yes," she said firmly. "I will tell them everything. Even knowing that Marlowe will try to destroy your character, that he will claim you are mentally unstable? Even knowing that," Tabitha confirmed, "what he did to his first wife, what he planned to do to me, that cannot go unpunished. I will face whatever I have to." Wade had never been more proud of anyone in his life. The arrest happened quietly, federal marshals riding to Marlowe's ranch and taking him into custody, along with Jensen and 2 other men named in the letters. There was apparently quite a scene, Marlowe insisting it was all a mistake, that he was being framed. But the evidence was too solid, the letters too damning. The trial was set for Boise, and Wade, Tabitha, and Marshal Cooper all traveled there to testify. It was Wade's first time in the territorial capital, and the size of it made Caldwell look tiny by comparison. The courthouse was an imposing building, and Wade felt Tabitha trembling slightly as they climbed the steps. "You can do this," he murmured to her. "I am right here." The trial lasted 3 days. Marlowe had hired expensive lawyers who tried every trick to discredit the evidence and the witnesses. They attacked Tabitha's character viciously, suggesting she was a gold digger who had orchestrated everything to steal Marlowe's money, that she was unstable and unreliable. But Tabitha stood firm. She told her story clearly and calmly, explaining what she had overheard and why she had run. When Marlowe's lawyers tried to rattle her, she met their questions with dignity and honesty. Wade testified about the fence cutting and the veiled threats, about finding the letters in Marlowe's safe. The prosecutor tied it all together, painting a picture of a ruthless man who had killed once and would have killed again. In the end, the jury deliberated for only 2 hours. They found Victor Marlowe guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, along with a host of other charges including attempted fraud and making threats. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in the territorial prison. As they led Marlowe away, he locked eyes with Tabitha one last time. Whatever he saw in her face seemed to break something in him. His shoulders slumped, and he looked suddenly old. Outside the courthouse, Tabitha broke down in Wade's arms, shaking with sobs that were equal parts relief and release. He held her while she cried, murmuring reassurances, and when she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "It is over," she said wonderingly. "It is really over." "It is over," Wade confirmed. "You are free." They returned to Caldwell a few days later, and it felt like coming home. Mrs. Patterson threw her arms around Tabitha when they arrived, and half the town seemed to appear to congratulate them on seeing justice done. But the question that hung between Wade and Tabitha remained unspoken. What happened now? They had grown close during the crisis, had confessed feelings that were real and deep, but those feelings had developed under extreme circumstances. Did they mean the same thing in the quiet, ordinary days of peace? Wade wrestled with the question for 2 days before deciding he could not wait any longer. He found Tabitha in the boarding house garden, the same spot where they had sat that first week. "Can we talk?" he asked. Tabitha looked up from the book she was reading, her expression nervous. "Of course!" Wade sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He had practiced this conversation in his head a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, all his prepared words fled. "I do not want this to be over," he said finally. "I do not want you to leave Caldwell, to go back to Silver City, or wherever else you might go. I want you to stay." Tabitha was quiet, her eyes searching his face. "Wade, I care about you, more than I can easily say, but I do not want to be a burden. You have already done so much for me. I cannot ask you to take on more." "You are not asking," Wade said. "I am offering. Tabitha, these past weeks with you have been the best and worst of my life. Best because I found you, because I got to know you. Worst because of the danger and fear. But even with all of that, I would not change a single thing if it meant you were not here now." He took a breath, gathering his courage for what came next. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it is fast. I know we met under terrible circumstances. But it is true. I love your strength, your courage, your kindness. I love the way you mend my brother's shirts without being asked, and the way you laugh when you think no one is listening. I love everything about you, and I want a future with you, if you will have me." Tabitha's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking. "I think I started falling for you that first day when you caught me in the street. You looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth protecting. And every day since, you have proven that, over and over. You are the best man I have ever known, Wade Harrison." Wade kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring all his feelings into it. When they broke apart, both breathless, he took her hand. "Marry me," he said. "Not tomorrow, not next week. Take all the time you need to heal, to figure out what you want from life. But someday, when you are ready, marry me." "Yes," Tabitha said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you, Wade. Someday soon." Someday came sooner than either of them expected. Tabitha had business to attend to first, reclaiming her father's ranch from the legal limbo it had fallen into. With Marlowe in prison, his claim on the property was void, and the territorial court restored her ownership. She could have stayed there, rebuilt her life in Silver City, but she chose differently. "I want to sell it," she told Wade one evening as they sat on the Harrison Ranch porch. "Too many bad memories. I would rather start fresh somewhere else." "Like where?" Wade asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "Like here," Tabitha said, turning to face him. "If your family would have me. I know the ranch is yours and your brother's, and I do not want to intrude. But I could help. I know ranching, and I am good with numbers. I could manage the books, help with planning, and maybe, eventually, we could build a house of our own nearby. Start our own herd." Wade pulled her close, his heart full to bursting. "My family would be honored to have you," he said. "And yes, we will build a house. Something just ours, with room for all the children we are going to have." Tabitha blushed, which Wade found utterly charming. "How many children are we having?" "At least 4, Wade said confidently. I come from a big family. It is all I know. 4, Tabitha repeated, shaking her head but smiling. You have ambition, Wade Harrison. They were married in November, 3 months after Tabitha had stumbled into Caldwell in her ruined wedding dress. The ceremony was held in the small church, with most of the town in attendance. Matthew stood as Wade's best man, and Mrs. Patterson stood with Tabitha, both of them beaming with pride. This time, when Tabitha wore a white dress and stood before a man at the altar, there was no fear in her eyes, only joy and love and certainty. When Wade slipped the ring on her finger, she looked at him like he had hung the moon, and he felt 10 feet tall. Their wedding night was spent in the new house Wade and his brothers had been frantically building for the past month. It was not finished yet, still missing trim work and a few other details, but the bedroom was done, and that was all that mattered. Wade carried Tabitha over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in their new home. Mrs. Harrison, he said, testing out the name. Mr. Harrison, she replied, her eyes soft. I like the sound of that. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other in the way of new spouses. Wade had never felt anything like the intimacy of being with Tabitha, of knowing that this was just the beginning of their life together. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking in whispers about everything and nothing. Are you happy? Wade asked, needing to hear the answer. Happier than I ever thought possible, Tabitha said honestly. 6 months ago, I thought my life was ending. Now I feel like it is finally beginning. Our life is beginning, Wade corrected. Together. Together, Tabitha agreed and sealed it with a kiss. The first years of their marriage were golden. Tabitha threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, her knowledge and skills making her an invaluable partner. She kept meticulous books, negotiated with buyers, and helped make decisions about breeding and grazing. Matthew and Samuel, who had been skeptical at first about having a woman so involved in the operation, quickly came to rely on her insights. You were right about holding those cattle until spring, Matthew admitted one evening, after a particularly successful sale. We got $3 more ahead than we would have in the fall. Tabitha's idea, Wade said proudly. She is a keeper, Samuel agreed, grinning at his sister-in-law. We should have gotten Wade married off years ago if this is the result, Tabitha laughed, flushing with pleasure. She had bloomed in the safety and love of the Harrison family, her confidence returning and growing. The shadows that had haunted her eyes were fading, replaced by contentment and joy. Their first child came in the spring of 1884, a son they named Michael after Wade's father. Wade had been terrified through the entire labor, pacing outside the bedroom while the midwife and Mrs. Patterson attended to Tabitha. When he was finally allowed in and saw his wife holding their red-faced, squalling infant, he felt something shift in his chest. We made that? He said in wonder, reaching out to touch Michael's tiny hand. We did, Tabitha agreed, exhausted but radiant. He is perfect. Michael was followed 2 years later by a daughter named Sarah, who had Tabitha's green eyes and Wade's dark hair. Then came James in 1888, and finally Emily in 1890. Their house grew loud and chaotic, filled with the noise and mess of children, and Wade could not imagine any other life. He watched Tabitha mother their children with the same fierce devotion she brought to everything else, teaching them to read and ride, to be kind and honest. She was patient with their mistakes and firm with their misbehavior, and Wade fell more in love with her every day. The ranch prospered under their joint management. They expanded their herd, bought additional grazing land, and built a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Matthew eventually married a widow from town, and Samuel found himself a bride in Boise. The Harrison family grew, and the ranch became a true family operation, with the next generation already learning the ropes. Through it all, Wade and Tabitha made time for each other. Date nights in town, long rides checking fence lines where they could talk without interruption, quiet evenings on the porch after the children were in bed. They had built something real and lasting, and they nurtured it carefully. Sometimes, usually late at night when the house was quiet, Tabitha would talk about that day in September when she had run from her own wedding, about how terrified she had been, how certain that her life was over. I should send Victor Marlowe a thank you letter, she joked once, though her eyes were serious. If he had not shown his true colors when he did, I might never have run, and if I had not run, I never would have met you. Thank you. Letters are probably not appropriate for convicted murderers, Wade said dryly. But I know what you mean. I do not wish what he did to you on anyone, but I will always be grateful that you ended up in Caldwell that day." "Me too," Tabitha said softly. "Me too." They received occasional news of Marlowe over the years. He was serving his sentence in the territorial prison, reportedly a model prisoner who spent his time reading law books and protesting his innocence. He tried several appeals, all of which were denied. Tabitha followed the news without comment, and Wade never pushed her to talk about it if she did not want to. Then, in 1892, they received word that Marlowe had died in prison, succumbing to pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. The news came via telegram from Marshal Cooper, now retired but still keeping an eye on old cases. Wade found Tabitha in the kitchen, preparing supper while Emily played at her feet. He handed her the telegram without a word, watching her face as she read it. She was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she carefully folded the telegram, handed it back to Wade, and went to the stove to check on the roast. "Are you all right?" Wade asked carefully. "Yes," Tabitha said, and she sounded surprised by her own answer. "I think I am. A part of me thought I would feel relief or satisfaction, or maybe guilt for being glad he was dead. But all I feel is sadness for what a waste his life was. He had so many advantages, and he chose to use them all for cruelty and greed. What a waste." "You are a better person than he ever was," Wade said, coming to put his arms around her from behind. "Better than he deserved." "I got a better life than he deserved for me to have," Tabitha corrected, leaning back against him. "I got you and our children and this beautiful life. He lost everything and died alone in a prison cell. I think that is justice enough." Emily tugged on her mother's skirt, demanding attention. And the moment passed. But later that night, after the children were asleep and they lay together in their bed, Tabitha cried quietly against Wade's chest. Not for Marlowe, he understood, but for the girl she had been, the one who had been so alone and scared that she had almost married a monster. "She survived," Wade whispered, holding her close. "That girl survived and became you, and look at everything you have now. Look at everything we have." "I know," Tabitha said, her voice thick with tears. "I know, and I am grateful every single day." The years continued to roll by, bringing the challenges and joys that all lives hold. There were droughts that tested their water resources and winters that killed cattle. There were accidents and illnesses, triumphs and heartbreaks. Through it all, Wade and Tabitha faced everything together, their partnership growing deeper and stronger with each passing season. Michael grew into a serious young man who loved ranching as much as his father did, already talking at 16 about expanding the operation and trying new breeding techniques. Sarah was fearless and adventurous, able to outride most of the ranch hands and determined to be the first woman to compete in the Caldwell rodeo. James was bookish and thoughtful, talking about going to university to study law. Emily, at 6, was still figuring out who she would become, but she had inherited her mother's determination and her father's steady calm. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Tabitha back to the spot where he had first caught her when she collapsed in the street. The town had grown and changed in the intervening years, but the spot was still recognizable. "I stood right here," Wade said, pointing to the ground. "And I saw this terrified woman in a bloody wedding dress, and I thought, she needs help. And you gave it," Tabitha said, taking his hand. "Even though you did not know me, even though helping me meant putting yourself and your family in danger, you gave it anyway." "Best decision I ever made," Wade said, pulling her close. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Tabitha Harrison." "You are my hero," Tabitha replied, her eyes shining with love. "You literally saved my life, and then you gave me a life worth living. How do I ever thank you enough for that?" "You thank me by being here," Wade said simply. "By building this life with me, by being my partner in everything. That is all I have ever wanted." They stood there for a while, remembering that day and everything that had come after. Then, hand in hand, they walked back through Caldwell toward the ranch, toward home, toward the life they had built together from the ashes of Tabitha's worst day. Time moved on, as it always does. The children grew and started lives of their own. Michael married and brought his wife to live on the ranch, taking on more and more of the daily management as Wade's hair went gray and his joints ached on cold mornings. Sarah did indeed become the first woman to compete in the Caldwell rodeo, scandalizing half the town and impressing the other half. James went to university in Boise and became a lawyer, eventually opening a practice that served the ranching community with fair dealing and honest advice. Emily surprised them all by falling in love with a teacher from back east and moving to Boston, though she returned every summer with her growing brood of children. Wade and Tabitha became grandparents, then grandparents many times over. Their house filled with the noise of the next generation, children who knew nothing of the violence and fear that had brought their grandparents together. To them, Wade and Tabitha were simply the steady, loving center of a large and boisterous family, always ready with advice or comfort or fresh cookies. One evening in the spring of 1912, when Wade was 62 and Tabitha was 58, they sat together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the mountains they had called home for 3 decades. "Do you ever think about that day?" Wade asked, knowing Tabitha would understand which day he meant. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not as much as I used to. It is strange how even the worst moments can fade when you have enough good ones to balance them out." "We have had a lot of good moments," Wade agreed. "So many," Tabitha said, reaching for his hand. Their fingers laced together, the gesture as natural as breathing after so many years. "You know what I think about more than that day? I think about the day after, and the day after that. I think about every morning I woke up next to you, every dinner with our children, every quiet evening right here on this porch. Those are the days that matter." "All those days where nothing special happened," Wade said with a smile. "Exactly," Tabitha replied. "The ordinary, beautiful days that make up a life. Those are the days I am grateful for." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded from gold to purple to deep blue. Inside the house, they could hear Michael's wife calling the children to supper, the clatter of plates and the excited chatter of young voices. The ranch stretched out before them, testament to everything they had built, everything they had survived. "I would do it all again," Wade said quietly. "Every moment, every challenge. I would do it all again to end up right here with you." Tabitha turned to look at him, her eyes still the same brilliant green they had been when she was a frightened young woman in a bloody wedding dress. Age had lined her face and silvered her hair, but to Wade, she was as beautiful as ever. "So would I," she said, without hesitation, without doubt. "I would run from that church. I would find you in Caldwell, and I would let you protect me until I was strong enough to protect myself. And then we would protect each other for the rest of our lives." "That is what we did," Wade said. "That is what we are still doing," Tabitha corrected with a smile. They were called in for supper then, pulled back into the warm chaos of family. But as Wade held the door for his wife, watching her move ahead of him into the house filled with their legacy, he felt the same fierce protectiveness and deep love he had felt that first day in the street. She had whispered that Marlowe would never stop hunting. He had promised he would never stop protecting. In the end, they had both been right and both been wrong. Marlowe had stopped, defeated by the law and his own hubris. But Wade had never stopped protecting, not really. He protected still, in 1,000 small ways every day, just as she protected him. That was marriage, he thought. Not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments, though those had their place. Marriage was showing up every day, choosing each other again and again, building something so strong that storms could not shake it. They had built that together, he and Tabitha. From the worst moment of her life and a split-second decision on his part, they had built something beautiful and lasting. They had built a family, a legacy, a love that would outlast them both. And if that was not a happy ending, Wade did not know what was. The years continued their march, each one bringing new joys and familiar sorrows. Wade watched his grandchildren grow, helped teach them to ride and work cattle the way his own father had taught him. Tabitha quilted and baked and kept the family stories alive, making sure the younger generations understood where they came from and what they were a part of. They traveled occasionally, taking trips to Boise and once even to San Francisco, but they always returned to the ranch with relief. This was home, the place where their story had taken root and flourished. Neither of them wanted to be anywhere else. In 1920, as Wade approached his 70th birthday, his health began to fail. It was nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for 7 decades. He moved slower, tired more easily, but his mind remained sharp and his heart remained full. Tabitha tended to him with the same fierce devotion she had brought to everything else in their life together. She made sure he ate well, that he rested when he needed to, that he still felt useful and valued, even as he handed over more of the ranch work to Michael and his sons. "You have earned your rest," she told him one afternoon as they sat in their favorite spot on the porch. "I do not want to rest," Wade said stubbornly. "I want to keep going, keep working, keep being useful." "You are useful," Tabitha assured him. "You are the foundation of this family, Wade. Everyone knows that. You do not have to prove it by running yourself into the ground." He grumbled but accepted her point. They spent more time together in those days, just the two of them, talking about the past and watching the present unfold. Their children and grandchildren came and went, bringing life and noise, but the quiet moments with Tabitha were what Wade treasured most. One evening in late summer, as they watched the sun set over land they had worked and loved for 40 years, Tabitha leaned her head on Wade's shoulder. "We did good," she said softly. "Did we not?" "We did wonderful," Wade confirmed, his arm coming around her. "We took something terrible and turned it into something beautiful. Not everyone gets to do that." "I love you," Tabitha said, the words as fresh and true as the first time she had spoken them. "I will love you forever, Wade Harrison." "Forever," Wade echoed. "That is a promise." Wade passed peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1925, just shy of his 75th birthday. He went to bed as usual, Tabitha curled up beside him, as she had been every night for more than 40 years, and simply did not wake up. The grief was crushing, but Tabitha held her head high as they buried him on the hill overlooking the ranch, in the plot next to his parents and brothers who had gone before. The service was attended by what seemed like half of Idaho, testament to the life he had lived and the man he had been. Tabitha lived another 8 years, staying on the ranch surrounded by family. She kept the books even when her hands grew arthritic, told stories to anyone who would listen, and made sure Wade's memory stayed alive and bright. She never remarried, never even considered it. There had been one great love in her life, and she had been blessed enough to have him for 43 years. When she died in 1933 at the age of 79, she was buried next to Wade, exactly where she had always wanted to be. The headstones were simple, bearing just their names and dates, but family lore held that if you stood there at sunset, you could feel the love that still connected them, transcending even death. Their descendants spread across Idaho and beyond, but they all carried the story of Wade and Tabitha, the cowboy and the runaway bride who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and built something extraordinary. It became family legend, the kind of story told around fires and dinner tables, inspiring new generations to believe in the power of courage, love, and choosing each other every single day. And in Caldwell, where it all began, there was a bench placed in the spot where Wade had first caught Tabitha when she collapsed in the street. A small plaque told their story in brief, and locals would often point it out to visitors as evidence that true love was real, that heroes still existed, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best ones. The bench bore a simple inscription. He promised to never stop protecting. She gave him a life worth protecting. Together, they built a legacy of love. It was a fitting tribute to a love that had started with blood and fear, but had grown into something powerful and lasting, a love that had changed not just 2 lives, but generations. Wade and Tabitha Harrison had proved that it was possible to survive the worst and build the best, to find hope in darkness and create light that would shine long after they were gone. Their story ended not with tragedy, but with triumph, not with fear, but with love, and that in the end was exactly what both of them would have wanted. They had faced down evil, built a life, raised a family, and loved each other with everything they had. The promise made on a dusty street in Caldwell had been kept faithfully to the very end, and the love they had shared remained as proof that some things, the best things, really do last forever.